first country to have its head put on the block, because we are loose change. We're easy to pay with. It's very, very easy. Israel is, for the first time since its inception, in a group of countries in the United Nations called WELG, Western European countries and others organization, which is Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States and Israel and Turkey. So it's a very interesting job. We only joined that group in the year 2000. We're talking about 10 years ago. Up till the year 2000, Israel in the United Nations didn't belong to any regional group, and because of that couldn't apply for any of the jobs in the United Nations. And even in WELG, when we joined 10 years ago, they said X amount of years you can't apply for any of the jobs until you have a history with us. Anyway, that history is already nearly a decade old, just over a decade old, and Israel will apply for the Security Council for the first time by then in its 70-year history, because by then it will be for the Security Council of 2019 and 2020. Now this might seem far away from you, but that's after I finish paying off my mashkanta. So that's actually not too long to wait. My mortgage will be paid off by 2018, so that's a very good time. So in 2018, the voting takes place for the Security Council of 2019-2020. We, at this moment in time, are on a clean slate to be presented by the Western European and Others organization, WELG. It's Israel and Belgium at this moment. Now, clean slate, you would say, okay, well, we've got a wonderful chance of getting into the Security Council for the first time in our history, in January of 2019. But there's a hitch, and a catch, and a problem. You have to get 2/3 of the vote, even if you're on a clean slate. Which means that of the 192 countries that vote, you need to get at least 128. Exactly. Now, something that happened some 2+ years ago was, I don't know if you remember it in the press, Venezuela squared off with Guatemala just over 2 years ago. There was a fight between them. It wasn't a clean slate for the South American position on the Security Council, and they went into 40 rounds of voting in the United Nations, and nobody got the 2/3. And in the end, the GRULAC countries, or the South American countries, as they know in the area, got together and nominated Panama as another candidate. We might be in the same problem in 2018, where we might be on a clean slate, but we won't get the 128 votes needed to pass the 2/3 majority in 2018. That's just some kind of problem, and how politicized the United Nations actually is in the whole system of the United Nations. It doesn't really matter. You know, I grew up always thinking that the Jews managed to focus in on absolutely every subject and connect it with Judaism or being Jewish or something like that. The Palestinians, ladies and gentlemen, have surpassed us by far. They have done their history very well. They've learned their lessons from us. And the United Nations is an unbelievable example of how the Palestinian issue has permeated every single committee, every single institution in the United Nations, except for outer space. But I'm sure that's going to come soon. We're going to soon have Palestinians in outer space and the problems of Palestinians in outer space. But it is unbelievable how, and now the Turks, of course, pardon?
Send them all there at outer space.
Send them to outer space. Not all that easy. They have managed to kricherein their way into absolutely every subject in the United Nations. I don't know whether I can use the word Tricherein in the United Nations. It'll be interesting. Maybe the German and the Austrian ambassador will understand, but even not sure about that. At least the New Zealand ambassador will, because he's Jewish. The focus is very difficult. It means that you've got to be aware all the time on how you can sit here. Somebody
No, it's
goes
fine.
up to
No,
sit.
they were worried that you might need water.
Oh, thank you, just in case. No, I've become a very good Israeli over the years. I can speak for hours and hours. How many hours did you say? 5 o'clock you're closing. 5 o'clock you're closing. Okay, fine. My daughters will have something to say if I'm not picking them up from school. I promise you that. Especially as I'm leaving this evening. And so we have a situation whereby Israel is ostracized, Israel is put into the corner, everybody behind the scenes talks wonders about Israel's ability in science and technology and agriculture and etc., etc. And yet when it comes to the actual voting, we are ostracized and we are the country that it's fun to bash over the head. But at the same time, our relationship with the United Nations is also very important for us. First of all, it's really the only multilateral, multinational organization in the world that counts. It's very, very important. Whether we like it or not, we've got to play the game. And not only play the game, but play the game well. And if we don't play the game well, then we've got a problem. Because that means we need a bilateral, very important agenda with the United Nations. And that boils down to money. First of all, we are contributor number 31 in ranking of the 192 countries to the United Nations. I don't know if you know that. It's based on size of population, importance and size of economy. We were 29, we're now 31. As other countries get wealthier or poorer, but we've always been in around number 30 as a contributor to the United Nations. So it's not a small amount of money. The United Nations budget is quite a big one. Their biannual budget, they also do biannual budgets in the United Nations. For the regular running of the United Nations is around about $5 billion. And that doesn't include peacekeeping, which on a 2-year basis is around about another $8 billion. So we're talking about something that has a very important focus. And to focus in on Israel's relations with the United Nations Security Council, General Assembly, and the 6 committees which sit from, I'm sorry, I didn't really talk about the year in the United Nations. The General Assembly, everybody thinks, starts in September and then ends. It doesn't end. The General Assembly starts in September and ends in September the following year. The year is divided up roughly into 3. The first 2 weeks of the General Assembly in September is focused in on all the big wigs coming from around the world, telling what they want to tell and explaining their view of world affairs. That's all the presidents, prime ministers, the kings, etc. Then from the beginning of October, or the last few days of September, through to the end of December are 3 months where the 6 basic committees of the United Nations sit. The 6 committees deal with different affairs. I'm going to take the 5th committee, for example, is the Ministry of Finance of the General Assembly or of the United Nations, and they decide how the budget is to be dispersed, etc., etc. That's, for example, and why did I mention the 5th committee? Because for all of this work, and then from December through to September again, the General Assembly sits in special sessions or continues to deal with a lot of the work that the regular agencies affiliated to the United Nations deal with, whether it's a new conglomeration called UN Women, which is now being set up. Chile's ex-president Michelle Bachelet will now head that organization in the United Nations, which will amalgamate all the all the agencies and departments dealing with women, for example, which is actually a very interesting focus. And then, of course, how much money you give to certain organizations and how much you really put in will then give you a say on the different committees and in the different areas. So, for example, we at the moment don't have any voting rights in all of what is done with UN Women. We give, unfortunately, an average of $10,000 a year to those cases, but we have found out that if we do give $250,000 over the next 3 years, we will be able to get a place at the table with voting rights. So now the thing is to try and explain to the Ministry of Finance why multilateralism is so important and why we need voting rights to help put ourselves on the boards of X, Y, and Z. Then of course we have what I call